Today we've got Jessy from Following Up. Jessy, have been looking forward to this for a while. I actually reached out to our mutual friend Eric, who Eric is like probably the biggest Following Up fan in history. Maybe
Yeah.
you can think of some other people in the world who are bigger Following Up fans. But Eric, I was like, hey, I know like you sort of know Jessy. Like, would it be possible to get us connected? Because I have loved Following Up for quite a few years. I'm not nearly as big of a fan as Eric. I will not claim that title at all. But he was like, "Oh yeah, like I'll totally, reach out and see if Jesse's interested." And sure enough, here you are, willing to
Here I
talk with
am. Yeah.
two random people who happen to like Following Up and have liked Following Up for
A long
basically like
time.
20 years of our lives. So
Yeah.
super
Wow.
grateful for you to show up. But yeah, how are you doing today, Jesse?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. Got a little bit of allergies going on right now, but that's just kind
Yeah.
of Oregon where I'm from. So
Yep. Changing the
it's
seasons, right?
yep. It's just like
You're
I think it's the number
going from
two
colder rain
spot.
to warmer rain, right?
Yeah. Yep. And it's pretty. I think the rain actually. They say for some people the rain sort of subdues things, but for me, I feel like it kind of stirs things up maybe. So
Amps it up.
um,
Mm.
yeah. But yeah, other
Man,
than that, it's been great.
that's good. That's good. What do you do in the springtime? Like what's your go-to activity that you just can't wait to do as soon as spring comes around?
As soon as spring, oh man, see, I just feel like I don't have hobbies that I often do anymore. I have 3 young kids, so I, my
Best
hobby
kids thing.
that I
Their hobbies
love is
become
just
your
playing
hobbies,
with
right?
them. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But they do get to go outside in the backyard because it's like finally not wet, and they just have a blast out there playing. And so I actually just love being out there with them and watching them. Because when I was a kid, I used to, you know, I didn't have like screens or, like I was limited on everything basically when it came to digital stuff. So it was all just go outside and play. And so yeah, it's kind of nice seeing them outside and just like going for it. So that's kind of my hobby, watching my kids.
Love it. You know what? It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah.
I have a 1-year-old, and I can't wait for him to go out and explore our little farm and stuff like that. I think it'll be a
Oh,
good
cool.
time.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Everything's
yeah,
new and weird to them, and
yeah,
such a
Hmm.
interesting thing.
yeah, 100%.
Well, let's talk about Falling Up, and we're just gonna want to basically like chronicle the history of Falling Up. So let's start out at the very beginning, even maybe before Falling Up started. Like, how did you get into music? How were you like, oh, eventually I want to maybe sing and play guitar and do all these musical things? Like, what inspired you in your life to maybe first start out doing any of that work?
Yeah, actually started, I I started pretty young, maybe like 7 or 8 years old on the keyboard. My parents had bought me one for my birthday or something. So I just kind of played around on it. But I was initially really interested in movies, and I wanted to, even at a really young age, I wanted to act. But that,
Mm.
although I did end up like doing theater and whatnot throughout growing up, I I found that like the reason why I liked acting was because I liked just cinema and story. And so when I had that keyboard, I found out that like I could think of interesting things when I kind of tinkled around on it. I didn't like play a full song or anything. I wasn't trying to learn anything specific. I was just trying to make things that sounded cool to me. So that's
Mm,
kind of where I started. Just like I started writing at a young age with just like coming up with melodies or whatever. Um, and then not long after that, I picked up a guitar and from then on, I was really adamant to learn guitar because I'm left-handed, so I wanted to learn it the right way. So that took me a while, not the right way, but just the right-handed way, because I at the time I felt pretty like left out with it. I mean, as a left-handed person, it is kind of weird to have a lot of things sort of forgotten about in the domain of being left-handed. But I wanted to learn the guitar because I just knew it was going to be a challenge if I kept up with the left hand. So that took me a while to figure out. And by then, I was just playing by myself and writing things by myself. Um, and then I played for a talent show in like seventh grade, and we had this like youth pastor who would come to our school. I went to a public school, but there'd be this youth pastor that would like kind of circle around at lunch, which is like an interesting thing to have, like just somebody kind of like, I don't know, scouting or whatever. But in my case, he overheard me
Scouting.
talking about guitar, and that I wish that there was like an opportunity to play the instruments that I played, because it was just like band orchestra stuff. And
Right.
so he overheard me, and he was like, "Hey, there's an opportunity for you to play at our church." And so he asked me to come and play guitar for the worship band. So I was just like a seventh grader, and that was my first introduction into church and into playing music that way, because my parents were never churchgoers. They actually didn't really want me to go to church, and they were actually, which is interesting, is they consider themselves Christians, but they just did not like organized religion. And even when I
Hmm.
was younger, they were just like not interested in me going to a church. And so my mom was like, "Why are you going there?" And I said, "Well, it's because of guitar." And she was like, "Okay, that's fine." So instead of being
As long
like,
as you're not going there
"You
for
shouldn't just,"
Jesus, we're all
yeah,
right.
yeah, you shouldn't just be going there for, for the thing that it's for or whatever. But yeah, so that's how I kind of got involved with the church and the youth group at a young age. And then music, playing, live, and sort of going from like just writing and coming up with ideas to match like a cinematic thing in my head, to being like, "Oh, there's a band. I could be in a band and
Mm,
like actually try to do a band thing or whatever." Um,
yeah.
so yeah, it was at that point that I started like trying to gather friends to play in a band. And so, yeah, that's what I did. Ultimately, we had a couple people from the youth group. And then uh, eventually we had, some friends from high school and whatnot that joined the band, and started out in that realm. But the
Wow.
weird thing is that, I was like, I was interested in, I'm a spiritual person, but I was sort of like on this um, kind of just this trajectory of trying to figure out why I was spiritual, or what I was spiritual for. Um, and church was at first that, because it had a glimmer of what I I was kind of looking for, which was this. Um, I mean, not to sound like I was always thinking about death and stuff, but like it was afterlife stuff, right? I was like, that's
Right.
fascinating to me. And so that's where I kind of started with my journey into spiritualism, and it started in church. And so a lot of the vernacular, and a lot of the just the feelings I was trying to evoke in my songs, um, were really at first kind of involved in what was I was surrounded in, which was that church at the time. So um, that it's kind of weird, because when I tell the backstory of Falling Up, I have to, because we had, to me it wasn't such a change, but to a lot of other people it was a change, where it was like, well, you guys had your first couple albums and they had Bible verses on the lyrics, and there some of the songs were, pretty about, clearly about God, and other songs weren't. And then you sort of evolved into something else. For
Mm,
me, it was like I was always that person, and I just was trying to sort of write my way toward it, if that makes any sense.
mm,
Um,
Hmm.
so I always have to sort of start with not just the origination of the band, but the origination of where we started in, specifically with the genre, because it was because of my involvement in the church and the members that were in the band, and where we started with the youth group, and ultimately where our connections came from, that landed us the deal with Tooth and Nail. So that's essentially why we we kind of had to be introduced in that area. You
Right.
know, I didn't set
Mm.
out to be like, I want to be in a Christian band.
Right.
Um, or that wasn't my dream. You know, my dream was to compose music for films and write films. And so that had been there from the beginning, and then it just kind of kept going, but evolved over time.
Right. There's obviously like a lot of sort of trapping that happens with people that grow up in youth group culture and maybe start playing music in that, and then eventually, and we hear this all the time with especially like other tooth and nail bands that we've interviewed, where it's like, yeah, that was the world that I was in, and it just seemed like the logical next step was to sign to like Tooth and Nail or whoever else, and now you're sort of stuck in that. And some bands were able to sort of break out of that, and some weren't, or whatever. But what I will say, what is sort of maybe the benefit of maybe starting out in that youth group world is for a lot of people, there's sort of like there's like two ways that you could maybe start out realizing like, oh, I really like playing guitar or I really like playing drums. And that is you have the wherewithal as a seventh grader or a ninth grader to
Yeah,
start
yeah,
your own band. And then you have
yeah,
to figure out like, all right, what's the garage that I'm going to do this in? What like who else is going to be willing to play with me? Like that, but that takes a lot of energy when you're 14 or 15 years old, right? To
yeah,
figure out I'm going to start out playing a band and then you have to figure out all the other things that go along with that to figure that out. And there is this whole other culture where it's like all that infrastructure is set up and it's just exactly what happened in your life where it was like this youth pastor was like, we got all the infrastructure for you to play guitar, like just play guitar at our church. And then you realize like, oh, I really love playing guitar and like I want to learn how to do that better and everything, right? And so
hmm,
for a lot of people, whether they remained in the Christian music world or not, a lot of them get their start because they were playing at like youth group, right? They were playing
yeah,
drums at
yeah,
youth group, they were playing guitar at youth group, and youth group allowed them sort of that opportunity where they didn't have to expend as a 15-year-old all the energy in the world of figuring out how to start a band. They were just like, "Oh, I
yeah,
just get to play once a week. I get to play my guitar, play my drums." And you fall in love with the art of playing guitar or the art of playing drums and you just realize like, "Oh, this is what I want to do in the world." And again, whether you stay in that
yeah,
Christian world or not, like that seems to be the start for a lot of people. And I find that really, really
yeah.
cool, even though it does in some cases, like maybe in Falling Up's case, sort of traps you of like, all right, well, now you're going to have to be like a Christian band or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I think it kind of likens to what you're saying when it comes to, you know, a lot of my friends, they found their significant others in college because they were around people their age. Whereas
Right.
a couple of my friends who didn't go have that experience, it was hard for them to find
Mm,
somebody because where do you meet somebody? Like, you know, they had to join social groups or, you know, it was like all of these concoctions of ideas on how to meet people, and it was more clear for the people who were in college. But at the same time,
mm-hmm,
it's like a lot of those people, maybe they just chose their significant other because they had the opportunity to choose somebody their age that they found attractive or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, that it is very similar to that. And so when it comes to the sort of the trap feeling, I think that uh, a big part that comes in, a third part to that equation though, is that um, you have you have this Christian industry that is sort of like ethereal. It's not really something specific, right? And you have bands and people wanting to be in bands and play music, which is specific. But then you have this overall uh, part of it, which is the industry, and that's how to make money from music. So I think that that's the third sort of part of the solution, which is that there was a label that also influenced me and our band with the business side of things, which was, okay,
mm,
how do we make money from this? And now we are in debt to this bank, right? And then it's like, how do we go from here? And that also affects my spiritualism because you are
mm,
saying you're a Christian label, and these bands you can't just say anything that you want or write about anything that you want. But so you have to sort of make ends meet, so to speak, in order to survive as a band and to make it as a band. And
Mm.
that was the hardest decision that I had to make, which was that I either had to choose a successful route in terms of financially, or a successful route in terms of my career and what I wanted to do and what
Hmm.
my passion was. Um, and that was over the course of our entire career. So that's why we had this really unique situation where you hear Crashings, our first album, and I've heard people talk about it as like it's sort of bipolar, because there's these songs that are sort of worshipy on it, and then there's these confusing things on it. And that was me. I recently explained it as in 2003, 2004, when we were recording and released that album. I was going through two kinds of puberty, a musical puberty and a spiritual puberty. So at the same time, my musical like life and my spiritual life were just angsty and like moving up in this like weird direction that I wasn't familiar with. And I was just trying to write through it, you know. So that's why things ended up the way it's sounding, sort of a little bit back and forth, because I was trying to figure it out, you know. Um, and I also think, with that being said, that Tooth and Nail at the time, they were also going through a big change, because
Yeah, big time.
they dropped like 80% of their roster, and they were focusing on like touring acts and stuff. And so when we were asked to be a part of, when they said they were interested in signing us, we were like a part of the new Tooth and Nail, which was,
Hmm.
now we're gonna not just have our bands, Brandon's friends that he signed or whatever. That like now it's gonna be bands that are serious bands that really want to get somewhere. Um, and so we felt at the time that we were ready, right, to get signed to a contract, because we were 17, 18 years old. That it was the perfect scenario for us. Also, I listened to Tooth and Nail bands, because even though my parents weren't, into church and stuff, they still didn't let me listen to really, music with a lot of cuss words and
Hmm.
violent, even if it was just like a lot of violent sounding music, the heavy guitars and stuff. My mom was like, they're probably not singing about things that are nice and good. Um, so I took solace in Tooth and Nail. I wouldn't get my CDs confiscated, right? I could buy those CDs and be safe. And there was, Solid State had a bunch of heavy bands on it, and I could listen to them and be okay with it. And so when Tooth and Nail rolled around, I was like, yeah, absolutely. This is big time, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
but were we ready? No, I wasn't ready as a
sure.
person. Um, but that's hindsight and whatnot. And I'm glad that we had the journey that we had. But at the same time, my wife and I go back, we talk about this a lot, because I don't uh, regret any of that. And I
Sure.
feel like Crashings and Dawn Escapes and even Captiva, those albums, I still I still find positives with, and I'm glad that I had the experience to do them, especially recording and production stuff. Um, but but as far as like saying that it was because of those things that I'm where I am today, I don't think that's true, because I'm a driven person, and I know what I want, and I knew what I wanted back then, and I would have wound up probably a little bit maybe ahead. I don't know. I feel like if anything, it held me back a bit. Um, that's my own decisions, right? My own choices, of
Hmm.
course. But I do look at it that way, that I don't feel like it's because of those opportunities that I am who I am today. I
Sure.
think that it was a crazy obstacle course that I got through
Yeah,
miraculously.
it wasn't really a perfect marriage between you two, from what I could tell, between you and BEC and everything like that. Um, I always felt, at least personally, like Falling Up was almost criminally underexposed.
Mm.
Um, like Falling Up always had great music, and it was authentic, and it always seemed like it was very, very real in the early years and later years, all the way throughout your guys' career. Um,
Yeah.
it just seems strange to me that you guys weren't getting a little bit more of that forward facing billing, in the music, in that world of the music industry, right?
Yeah, we had, when our first album came out, it was the first week, sales were like the highest that they had ever had.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal for the label, and immediately we sort of got put into this category of the top 10% on the label of bands that were selling music because somebody yeah, I don't know if it was at the label or at EMI or something at the time, but later on, I was really curious about all the details of our contract. Because when we signed our contract, I was 18 years old, and I was like, "I'm going to sign this thing." And so we read through it, but
It's a
it's
good thing
jargon, right? Like
it's a good thing
even
an army
now,
recruiter wasn't around.
yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, it's like that's what we wanted, and so I always look at it like our contract. Sure, it was messed up, but I also didn't push back on anything.
Sure.
And so that was the decision that I made. But um, I did have questions later about the details of it. And one of the big things that I learned was that, and this is just from this person telling me, so I don't know if this is fully true or not, but this person said that the way Tooth and Nail runs is they have a trench. They call it cross collateralization. So there's a trench under all the bands, and you go into debt with this band of 20,000 for their album. You go into debt with this band for 80,000 with their album, but it all pools underneath. So all
Mhm.
of the sales are trying to fill this hole that's there underneath. So if you're a band that doesn't sell that many records, then you know, unfortunately, they didn't know that when they paid for the album to be made, right? They hoped that it would sell a lot, but it didn't. So then that debt is bigger, and it's the ratio is off. They're not paying off their own money. They're paying off the entire debt that the
Right.
label has. So that was unfortunate for us when it comes to what we really wanted to do. And by the time the Captiva year rolled around, when I was going to make that album, so we had done Crashings, and it was a high selling album. Um, and then Dawn Escapes was actually recorded I wrote the album in 2 weeks, and then we recorded it in
The whole
three.
the
So
whole
it was
thing?
very rushed. Yeah. I wrote the whole thing in two
Basically like a
weeks.
song a day.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And it was not just like, we toured for a year and a half, and then I got to go home, but while the other bandmates got to go and see their families and their friends and stuff, I had to write this album because I only had 2 weeks to do it. And so I was
Oh,
just there
it
like
was a
at home
deadline.
in my room.
S So it
Yeah, it
was a
was a
deadline
deadline.
is what you're saying.
Mhm.
Oh my
They had
gosh.
the studio booked with Elvis Baskett, and they were like, "Here's your time," the tour ended, and I had this time. So, that's why the songs are pretty crammed, they are pretty similar to each other, and ultimately, I didn't really feel like I grew at all, with that album because I didn't have a chance to. Then by the time Captiva rolled around, just before it, I had written a bunch of demos, and organized it in a way of making this concept album. And I had this package. I did like artwork. I'm not a good illustrator at all, but I just I poured myself into this thing, and it's sci-fi, and it was ethereal and all this stuff. It had catchy stuff in it, but it was definitely arty, right? It wasn't
Mhm.
your radio singles. Um, and I went to the label with this package, and I was really excited about it. And they just said, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to make an album that has singles on it and that can sell. And at the time, of course, I was devastated. And I was like, this isn't the label for me. These aren't the people for me, because my mindset was they signed our band, and they knew that I was the writer. Like my band was amazing at like all the stuff that they did. I was very lucky to have all of the members that were in the band. But I would write the songs by myself, and then I would take them to the band, and they would polish them, shape them, add a missing part. But my whole process was that I had to exhaust myself on the demo before I take it to the band. And so if that meant a guitar part, a bass part, a drum part, I was going to put it on. I wasn't going to hold it back for any favors. I wanted to get out any ideas. If they were cool enough, then they would be cool enough. But sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes it'd just be a chord progression, some lyrics and a melody, and then the band would shape it. So, but at the time I was thinking, I knew that like the label signed us because I was the songwriter and that's what I was doing. So I was disappointed that they didn't recognize that that's why they signed us, but I was mistaken. And that was a
Mm.
juvenile thought to have, I think, um, because they didn't sign us for that reason. They signed us to make money, and it's a business move. So, of course, if we're in the top 10% and they're cross collateralization, they have a debt to pay off, and they can't afford their top 10% band to go off and make an arty project that's not going to sell. So
Right.
they had to put the heavy foot down and say, no, we're going to have a radio record from you. And that's where that tension came in,
Mm.
because I felt like we were supposed to be somewhere else. I was always asking them to like have a showcase for other major labels or something, because I just thought maybe we weren't the right fit, um, and that never happened. So that's kind of where the frustration began to cultivate.
Wow.
Which is it's interesting. It does feel like one of those things, and who knows? Like I've never been a musician, but talking to other musicians, it does. I get the sense that when a musician is trying to force, also, I hate when Apple does this stupid thing. I so when a musician tries to force a single to happen, it ends up turning out to not be a very good single, generally
Yeah,
speaking.
Usually.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so it's like unbelievable at the like where these labels think that like, all right, no, you're gonna write singles, and assume that that's actually going to happen, like where you're gonna get a really popular single, and so I don't know if that was the case when you were writing Crashings, for example, but there were like some singles in that album that did really well for you all, and obviously clearly it sold really well. But then when you get to a point in your third album where it's like, no, you have to write singles, and it's like, all right, well, I don't,
yeah,
and I could be wrong, but like I can't imagine that Captivia sold as well as the previous two albums, where you might
yeah.
not have felt that pressure to write singles as much. So it does feel like one of these things where it's like as soon as you start feeling that pressure for most musicians to write
Hmm.
singles, it's actually that's like at the point where it's like you're not actually going to write too many great singles. No, maybe
Yeah, yeah.
Captivia. If I remember right, like Hotel Aquarium did pretty well. I mean, maybe, is it still like your one of your top Spotify songs, maybe? But anyway,
Yeah,
it
Hotel
does feel like
Aquarium
one of
was up
those things
there.
where you get this pressure to write singles, and it's like, I don't know if I can actually do that well. And certainly, it does seem like the audience can tell when, like, all right, you're clearly just trying to write singles, and yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. Yeah, that it is like when it's the same with like children's books, right? If you're trying to write a children's book, you're gonna miss it. You have to write a book for like the story has to speak to whatever the story is, and children are just the byproduct of it if they're attracted to
Yeah.
it, if they think it's a good story. So it's like that is exactly what it is when you sit down and try. I didn't know when I wrote the songs on Crashings until we went into with Aaron Sprinkle, and he was like, he cut a verse. It was double long, right? And he cut the verse in half, and this was the very first like moment, um, and we were all confused. We were like, "What are you doing? You're cutting our verse completely in half." And he's like, "We got to get to the chorus before 40 seconds because this is too long." It was like a minute and a half before you get to the chorus. And so that was the first time that I had heard of that. And then the time got shorter and shorter, and it was like 30 seconds. Okay. So then you're trying to write to a formula instead of just writing a song that works. And it's so
Right.
weird because I don't listen to the radio. But we got a new car recently, and it came with like, It came with
Serious?
a Sirius, yeah.
Yeah.
And so there was I've been listening to, just the random stations that are on there, and there's this top 100. Um, and I was so weirded out that they started playing, and I don't know how long this had been going on, but they play like a snippet of the chorus before they start the song. So they'll be
Yeah.
like, here's what you're going to listen to, as if people cannot wait for probably what is now 20 seconds of time to get to the chorus, because they're like, what song is this? I don't know what it is. It's taking too long. So they have to hear the hook. I don't think so. I think that that is just a panic that
Yeah.
the industry does, because they're like, how do we keep selling? And we have to change to sell to these new kids that have ADD. And it's like, that's not true at all. I think that they can handle 30 seconds of,
What is
of verse.
what is so funny about that is that this is actually a story that's as old as time, or at least as old as the music industry, I should say. I remember hearing a story about David Bowie back in the 80s, and David Bowie in the 80s was not doing great. I mean, his record sales had dropped off significantly since the 70s, and he does this album called Let's Dance with Niles Roger, and uh, Niles says, "You need to start with the chorus." And Bowie's like, "I've never done that before, and I don't want to do that." And Rogers is like, "Nope, you're gonna do it." And he's like, "Fine, whatever, I'll do it." Does it,
Yeah.
becomes a massive number one hit, right? And it's
Yeah. Yeah.
worldwide. And then if you go back to the 60s, I mean, that was as big as it got. I mean, there was
Yeah.
choruses starting off all the time, kind of
Yeah.
starting
Yeah.
with with Motown and stuff like that, especially. So it is kind of interesting that that's the case. And if you go through like music history, it's all over the place. But also, a lot of these bands or a lot of these groups would have much longer form media inside those same albums with these, really, really catchy singles. And I don't see why that
Yeah.
middle
Yeah.
ground maybe couldn't have been found.
Yeah. I think that where I was at, even in the early days, was, and where I still am at, is if I'm working on a band album or a solo project, but it's an album and it has a set of songs, and these songs are supposed to be digestible and hopefully loved by people who, in a universal way, right? That I like to put a ceiling, because if you have something too wild, then it's just too abstract and too wild. But
Yeah.
if you have a ceiling on that, then it can exist within a little bit of control. And I think that that is really powerful, because Adele, like, is an amazing singer, and it's because she has control of her voice. It's not because she just belts it all the time. She can
Right.
really manipulate her voice in a complete control way, and that's what makes her, to me, a really popular singer. And so I think that it's that control that really does uh, like work a lot with any kind of band music, and it has to be digestible, it has to be universal. So I get that. What I don't understand is where it's like, okay, you have to do this formula, because
Right.
like you're saying, even some of those songs like back in the day, they would start out with the chorus. Look at ABBA, like the
Yeah.
"You Can Dance, You Can Jive, Having the Time of Your Life." That's the pre-chorus. They start, or no, that's a post-chorus.
Of
They
course.
started the song on the post-chorus, and then they moved to the verse, and then they moved to the pre-chorus, and then the chorus, and then the post-chorus. That's such a weird way to do it, but you can't
Yeah.
listen to the song any other way. It's so good.
Yeah.
So I think that there's nothing wrong with getting to your catchiest part fast. But I do think that there's something wrong with not trusting the audience,
Mm. Yeah.
um,
Yes.
and
I
not
think
believing in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think good music at the end of the day is going to prevail. And so yeah, regardless of like what that song is, if it's a damn good song, that song people are going to care. Now,
Yeah, yeah,
clearly there are probably millions of cases of like somebody who's like an incredible songwriter. People that we probably think of. It's like, why did they not blow up? That person should have blown up. That song should have blown
yeah,
up, or whatever. but also there's so many there's so many good examples of songs that are just like that clearly is just a really well written song,
Take
and
Thriller, for example, right?
there's a reason why people care about it.
Yeah, take
Yep.
Thriller, for example, right? I mean, there's like what, like 3.5 minutes of other music that's, or like the lead-in music that comes
Yeah. Yeah.
before they get to anywhere near the chorus, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's
They're gonna,
doable.
they're gonna find a way to cut it out if they want to play it and it's big, right? Like
Yeah.
they're gonna do it because it's, yeah, like you're saying, it has to be heard and it rises above all else. So if it's catchy and if it's cool, then it's gonna resonate with people.
Right.
Yeah.
I just think that setting yourself up in a situation where you're trying to do that is swinging too hard. I think it
Mhm.
just comes naturally.
Yeah.
When it comes to like a concept album, yeah, I don't agree with myself 2007. Like, I don't think that that would have been a smart move, um, for us, given the fact that we were trying to have success, I guess, financially speaking, because we were, in a lot of debt and we were struggling, even though we were a high selling band, we were not high selling in our lives. We were just basically living off of, ramen and stuff. So it was like, that was the choice that I had to make at the time was, okay, well, this should maybe be a financial decision. Ultimately, it didn't even compound to that. And that's why I just had to be like, okay, no, because this is clearly for you to make money, not for us to share in any kind of equity.
Right.
So, um,
Yeah.
and that's a whole other case. But as far as the artistic side of it, yeah, I think that a concept album would be a little bit too much, especially given that time where I actually had the time to write the songs caged that I wanted to do. Instead, I was like an Amish boy that just got let out into the world, and I was like, I'm gonna write all this crazy stuff,
But it's the
and it
best rum
just was,
springer ever.
yeah. So yeah, it's a weird situation, right? And looking back on it as in my life, it all adds up. It all makes sense, like both sides, right?
Yeah.
Um, so
So coming out of the breakup with BEC and everything like that, what is your mentality at that point? Because I'm sure that your relationship with music has changed to a certain extent. And all of a sudden, you do have this freedom where it's like, where is that ceiling, right? You don't necessarily
yeah,
have someone
yeah,
standing over your shoulder being like, "Hey, there's the ceiling." Now you're like, "Oh, I have to kind of focus some of this stuff to a certain extent." So
yeah.
where do you personally, as a songwriter, go from there?
So just before after Captiva, um, I, I was sort of just numb, going through the motions, wasn't happy. We were touring a lot, and I was pretty depressed. And But ultimately, I was really trying to find my way, and the label actually offered us a solution. They said that they were willing to let us go of our contract, and we can make one more album if we wanted. Um, and
Wow.
so I was stoked for that. And what I did in that time was, yeah, I was that Amish boy. I just wanted to be super artistic. So I wrote this concept and wrote the songs. It was different from the concept album that was going to be Captiva, because that was kind of like an ex-girlfriend. It was like too painful. So I started from scratch. I wrote something new. And then we had I had taken a break from touring, and I had done the sort of bluegrassy folk project with our drummer, and Casey Crescenzo from the Deer Hunter. And the River Empires was really my sort of outpouring artistically of stuff that I just always wanted to do. So when I came back to that opportunity to do the last album with Falling Up, I just went all balls out, and I was like, I'm just going to do this concept album and make it all psychedelic and stuff. And Casey, who I really connected with on everything artistic, he wasn't writing radio songs. He was just doing the band that he wanted to do. It didn't matter. Um, he was an enabler of everything that I just thought was great with it. Um, and it it was an amazing time, and it was an amazing project. Um, but then the label dropped us shortly after. So
Yeah.
right after we released it, and it was a flop. A lot of people were like, "These guys are on drugs and this and that." We're just
Were you
like
on
totally
drugs?
sober. No, we were. I was just like totally sober, just being a weirdo. Like, I think that might be worse. Maybe I was just like a sober
You
weirdo in
didn't
the
have an
moment.
excuse. You were like, no, this
Yeah,
is me doing this sober.
yeah, yeah. I'm just a creep.
You could have just
So
said, "Hey,
yeah,
I'm from Oregon. This is how we are."
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's it's all the secondhand smoke.
Yeah, it's a contact high. There's mushrooms growing everywhere. Um, but yeah, it was pretty wild. So we did that album, and then we got dropped from our label. And so at that time specifically, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with doing the band thing, and I want to go back to my first love, which is the cinema, writing scripts and scoring the script. So I set off on a journey personally where I started writing scripts the way that I wrote my first songs, which is really shitty. Like I just wrote like the worst scripts ever. But ultimately I got to the point where I thought that they were decent enough to be like, okay, this doesn't suck. So then I got really into these stories, and I thought that that would be my career. And then ultimately I had some friends ask me about Falling Up, and they were like, you guys still have a lot of fans, you still have like people who want to hear music. And it was then that I sort of had an epiphany, which was that I can I can keep my story and my screenplay world separate from the band world, and they can have blends where they blend with each other here and there. But what I was trying to do with Falling Up near the end was just push all of my theatrics on the band, when ultimately what I needed to do was just sort of separate them and use each of them to influence each other, but keep the band in the band category and keep the screenplays in the screenplay category. And so that's what I set off to do when we started making our indie albums. Is I focused on writing albums that were more digestible and more universal for our fans, that had a little bit of blend of storytelling and lore in them, but not so much that it was like, why are you guys a band? Why aren't you, writing for Broadway or whatever? Like it, you know, it was unmistakable that this was an album that you listen to from a band that plays it and they can play it live, versus you don't know what you're listening to. Is this one guy with a keyboard, or is this, just something weird? So it was in that moment that I felt our true success had happened, because we were independent. We were marketing ourselves. We were running everything ourselves. And I learned a lot of business decisions, or a lot of business, just in the music industry in general, when I had to figure out publishing and all that stuff. So it was a really helpful time, for me to learn things about the music industry. But ultimately, I was able to have that outlet with songwriting, and still continue with my script. So that's kind of what that trajectory ended up being. But we just kept it primarily. We never toured after we got dropped from Tooth and Nail. Um, we did one 2-week tour down the West Coast, but it was just for fun. The rest of the time we did a couple shows, but they were just one-off shows. We haven't actually toured since, the last uh, label album. Um, and that was just because I could never figure out a way to make it work, without going into debt. And at the time too, 2008 was the financial crisis. So it was, gas prices were insane, and
Right.
everybody was panicking. And so it was just not a good time to tour. So I just focused only on recording studio albums, and we just left it at that, play a show here and there. But yeah, then ultimately in 2015, I wanted to kind of hang the hat up on Falling Up because it was starting to distract me from it was kind of like I knew that I could sell a certain amount of albums to the fans, and every couple years or so that was attractive to be like, oh, I can, this screenplay stuff is not making any money. My composing for films is not getting anywhere. And now I have children. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do? It, that was too attractive to me to keep going back. And so in 2015, I knew that I had to just kind of end it so that I wouldn't be tempted by it. And I know
Mm.
that sounds crazy because it's like, well, why can't you just do it? But I would never have gotten to where I am at now with my other part of the career had I kept committing time to it, because it still took a lot of creative energy out of me and time to get those albums out and written.
Yeah.
So that's when in 2015, our last album, I was like, I think this is the one to hang our hats up on. Um, and and essentially it still is. We have a new project that I'm working on, but it's under a new band name, but it's kind of derived from Falling Up. So it's the Chilling Alpine Adventure, which is a song on Fangs. Um, and so this new band is called the Chilling Alpine Adventure, but our first album that's coming out this year is essentially being presented by Falling Up. It's sort of like a passing of the torch or a hallway
Sure.
from one room to the next. Um, and that was a way for me to, because now I feel like I can manage my time to work on a project, but I didn't want to go back to Falling Up fully because I ended it, I hung the hat up, and I just felt like it was honorable to keep that the way that it was. Um,
Sure.
and I felt good about the last album. So that's why it's just sort of this like transition into the new band.
Sure. What is Chilling Alpine Adventure? Is it going to sound different? Is its vibe going to be different? What should we
Yeah,
expect?
it's gonna be it's kind of like in between Falling Up and a new idea that I've been working on. So it's sort of
Okay.
like it would be an understandable record that we would release as Falling Up. Like I think if you hear it, you'd be like, I could see Falling Up having this as a release. Um,
Sure.
So it's
if
like
they have
ska following
evolved.
up, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah,
I figured.
completely
I
new.
figured.
Yeah. Upbeats and horns. I don't think I've
Yeah,
heard
got
it
rid of the
before.
DJ, got a saxophone player instead, and yeah, this is what you
Yeah,
get.
the DJ. Oh man, yeah. Like I was so obsessed. So like kind of circling back real quick to just like upbringing and stuff. At the time it was rapcore that was so big.
Yeah.
Um,
So good.
and so when we started out, we were we were initially kind of punk. Like we loved Blink 182 and Linkin Park, so it was sort of like a weird blend. But ultimately I started rapping. I was like a 16-year-old, and I have pretty straight hair and thick hair. But I thought it would be cool to perm my hair. And so but when I went into the beauty school, uh, they my the back of my hair wasn't long enough, but the top was. So she was like, "Are you sure you still want to perm it? Because we'll just do the top." And I was like, "Hell yeah!" So I just had the top of my hair permed, and then the back was all straight and weird. Um,
So
and I
you look like a head of broccoli, is what you're saying.
yeah. And I would get up on the stage and rap. I was like, so ultimately some of those songs, that I would like rap to the crowd and stuff made it on the Crashings album. And it was because they were like the big crowd pleasers at the moment. But thinking now and all of the band, I'm pretty sure I haven't talked to all of them, but most of them are like, yeah, that we shouldn't have put those songs on the album. So
I'll be honest. What the world needs right now is a rapcore / ska album. So if you could like figure out a way to mix those two, you've got instant success.
yeah, and honestly,
Yeah, you're gonna put
like
your kids through college
rapcore,
with that.
yeah, I think so. Rapcore could be really big in like trailers and movies and stuff because it has that big drive, that energy.
Oh,
Then you add
Definitely.
horns in there,
such a
and
big
oh
sound.
yeah,
Have you always been a very tenor centric singer?
I don't really know. Like, I never considered myself a singer, and I honestly sort of don't still. In terms of like, I can sing because I wanted to write a song, and the melodies and the lyrics were part of that, and nobody else could do that I was, around at the time, so that's why I just started singing. I learned
Yeah.
a very hard way of singing because, well, our first tour was, like, a year and a half, and at some point in the middle, I completely lost my voice. We had to cancel 3 shows,
Mm.
because like, the show that I lost it at was sound check, and I was just like and the promoter was just like, because it was the show was gonna start in, like, an hour, and
Oh
I had
no.
no idea that I had lost my voice up until that point. So, but anyways, I learned how to sing, the right way, and, but ever since then, I just feel like I still never considered myself, like, a professional singer, and I
That's
don't say
wild
that
to
to,
me.
like, come down on myself or to fish for compliments. I literally just believe that. Now, the only thing that I will say that I feel confident in and I'm proud of my abilities is control. And like I said with
Yeah.
Adele, I'm definitely not Adele for sure, but in terms of being able to control your voice, that's what I sort of try to do more than anything. But a lot of times when I'm singing like high stuff, it's hard for me to hit that. It would be takes in the studio, and then my voice would be gone, or like I'd
Wow.
cough up a little bit of blood. Um, I
Like for real?
legitimately yeah, yeah, I coughed up, some blood sometimes. Yeah, I was just
You
singing
do you have like
too high.
do you have like 1840s tuberculosis? What's going on?
I just shredded it, but yeah, I don't know, maybe it seems
I've
like that
never
would be
heard of
something
someone
more in my
coughing up.
lungs. Yeah, I did have some other issues at the time, so I'm curious, maybe that was more connected to it. Um, but the yeah, I always felt like I definitely don't like to sing, too low or too mid-range. I will
Uh,
always choose to kinda be higher than anything else,
I've
so
always been impressed by the purity of your tenor range voice. I mean, it is really something to write home about. It's good. It's really
oh, well,
good.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's why it's surprising to me that at least from your perspective, the way you're presenting it, it doesn't sound like it's like something that you necessarily put out there as like the main driver of your message.
Yeah, I honestly wish it sounds weird, but I kinda wish I had a different voice. I'm not Uh, I'm used to hearing myself recorded. Like, I know
Yeah.
a lot of people, they hear themselves recorded for the first time, even if they're talking, they're like, "That's weird." I definitely got over that quickly. So it doesn't sound weird to me to hear my own voice, but I always kinda wish that I could sing a little different, and sometimes I try to sing a little different, but then that actually ends up worse. It sounds really
Mm.
goofy. So, I'm just like, "Alright, I'm stuck with this." I'm happy, with it, I always just kind of have you know, wish I was a little bit taller vibe, right? Like, just a little different.
That's so interesting because I do think your voice is sort of it's very recognizable.
Very. And it
Like
cuts through any mix so well.
yeah, and I'm like a person where I'm like, okay, there's clearly super talented singers in the world, but they sound like there could be multiple talented singers and they all kind of sound the same. And I'm way more interested in who are the singers that you can tell that is the singer of that band
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
by their voice. I think of to me like a quintessential example of that is like Jeremy Innick from Sunny Day Real Estate. Like quintessential
absolutely, yeah,
voice. It is so recognizable. It doesn't matter if it's a solo project, Sunny Day Real Estate. Like he has such a unique sounding voice.
Yeah.
And it's like artists
absolutely.
like that where I'm like, that's what I look for. And I think to a certain degree, falling up in your voice is very recognizable. Like if I hear your voice, even if it doesn't sound like a falling up song, I would be able to pick out and like, oh, that's that's Jesse from Falling Up. Like that, you
Yeah.
could tell that just by your voice because I think again, it's very recognizable.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's good to hear.
And for me, I prefer that more than like you being able to hit every single note of any sort of like octave or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely feel like, there's the kind of showy vocals and somebody that when you hear them sing, it's like, oh, you're a great singer, right? And I've had friends have been the friends that know me won't say, "Oh, you should go on, you should try out for American Idol," because the friends that know me will say, "No, you wouldn't work on American Idol," and it's because I can't open my mouth and sing, especially a cappella, and for somebody to be like, "That's it. That's gonna make us money." I just think I just personally think that it's, that I just have a voice that blends maybe with my music specifically that I do, right? Um,
Sure.
so yeah.
Interesting. I love it.
And what's really cool, especially again about your voice, is the fact that like, yeah, you have some of these more like alternative metal type of songs early on, and it blends well with that. And you can even do like more of the art rock indie stuff, and it blends well with that. Like your
Yeah.
voice is able to translate into different genres really well, and it still really works. And I again, that's part of the reason why I really appreciate your voice in particular.
Same.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's like the blend kind of thing. Going into other music and stuff, I actually find myself doing that just in general because the last 5, 6 years I've been working on ads, and they're always like, "We want jazz song, or we want this hip hop song, or whatever." So I kind of have to do like these chameleon aspects where I'm writing styles differently from the other one week to the next. And it's always fun to just sort of put myself in those shoes, for a little bit and be like, funky or whatever. Sometimes it's like
Mhm.
they really want soul, or swagger. I get that so much. Swagger. It's like the new word to use for anything. I don't even know what it means anymore. But I'm always like, if I find something that I'm like, oh, this is like soulful and stuff, I just immediately think if this is a Truman Show situation where people are watching me, this is like the moment that they turn it off because it's just this white kid like, "Ooh, ooh, ooh." I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you why are
Writing a
you
swagger song for Cialis.
yeah, yeah. It's totally like that. It's just weird. Um, but yeah.
I love that. That's so cool. All right. It's time to get into top 5 most influential albums. Are you ready?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right. You can
Yes.
start wherever you like. You don't have to go in order or anything like that. So,
Okay, well, the first album that I bought, and it was the thing that got me into movie soundtracks, it was Henry Mancini, Greatest Hits. So, it had, like, he had done Baby Elephant Walk. All of these songs weren't soundtracks from, like, really cinematic things, but they were, like, really prolific for me because it was just instrumental, and it was, he did Pink Panther. He was kind of like sort of gangstery
yeah.
movies and stuff and whatnot. So I think that that was his style. But yeah, that album was really prolific for me. Romeo and Juliet song was a
Sure.
really big deal. Um, Incubus, Make
He
Yourself.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
For
I'm
sure.
sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. You're good. I was just gonna say, Mancini kind of oftentimes gets like kind of forgotten about in the
Absolutely. Yeah.
in the composition world. I feel like. I mean, he's
Yeah.
absolutely legendary, and his
So
status
many.
should not be forgotten whatsoever.
Yeah. So many songs were like Shot in the Dark, like all these basically styles came from some of the
Yeah,
songs, and so
100%.
it's pretty. And I think Lana Del Rey attributed one of her songs to the Romeo and Juliet theme
Mm,
because it was like it's pretty influential in her style too. Um, but yeah, so Incubus Make Yourself was a big formidable one as far as like just guitar work and uh, vocal work. Like that was really inspiring for me.
I was gonna
um
say I can definitely see that in terms of your ability to blend vocally. Incubus is exactly that makes perfect sense now that you say it.
Yeah, I loved, and that's kind of where like my sort of pull to like DJ scratching was, because I
Yeah.
loved how Incubus used it in their music, and I thought that I wanted that, but turns out it wasn't for me. It was just they did it in such a well way that it was like, man, I thought I could do it. I thought it would
Right.
work. Um, but yeah, that album was a big deal. Currently, I guess the album that has the biggest influence on me as far as composing and whatnot is Philip Glassworks.
For sure.
He's my favorite composer of all time, and just the minimalist movement I think is really cool, because it's more about having something that is memorable and evokes feeling without hardly anything, just a
Mm.
piano. And I think that that's a huge deal to me in terms of what I try to do, make something memorable regardless of what it is. Um, and then shoot, I'm gonna have to look at my list real quick.
No,
I
you're
wrote
good.
it down.
Now I want to
Um,
go into like soundtrack talk, but I mean, I don't know if we have enough time, but I think that'd be a lot of fun to talk about. We might have to have you on again so we can talk about more of that
Absolutely,
aspect of
yeah.
things.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of soundtrack, so another album is the Village soundtrack, and I know that's
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
for a lot of people that might be sort of a, I don't know, ear not ear candy, but sort of guilty pleasure. But I think that that's not true. I think that it's like a beautiful album, and
Yeah.
that soundtrack was, I mean, the best part about the movie. I do love the movie, but I definitely feel like the soundtrack was like way up there, um, in terms of that. Um, and then honestly, this one is hard to say, but I stand by it because it had a huge influence on me, was Linkin Park,
Mm.
Hybrid Theory,
Hybrid
because
theory.
I
even
was
at
about to
the
say, I'm like,
time,
it does feel like Linkin Park should at least be mentioned, because you can hear it at least in the early Falling Out stuff for sure.
Yeah.
yeah, it was just such a like formidable, mainly like electronics and the things that you could do with like technology. It really felt like the right way to move into technology instead of singing about robots. It was like, using Pro Tools in a way that was pretty magical.
Yeah.
So that's kind
But
of what
but
set me up into
later
that.
later they would sing to robots in Transformers. So, there's that.
Yeah,
It's true.
yeah. Which I love. You guys have probably seen this, but I love when they've been putting that song on the end of other movies.
Yeah.
That was at the yeah.
It's a
So it's
great
like
meme. Yeah.
the Lord of the Rings one. Like that's so great. I just love it so much. It truly does work on almost every movie ending. Um, yeah. And then last album. Oh man, it's gonna be a toss up because I feel like I don't want to. I the Deer Hunters Act 2 is definitely one
Fantastic.
of my favorite albums of all time. Um, but I feel like it just hit that moment when I really wanted to do music that was, well, I mean, I looked up to Casey just like I was looking up to all those bands when I was a kid. In that moment, right? I was like, this is everything that I wanted to do. It was a different style, but I had never heard somebody just like confidently doing this stuff that was clearly not going to go on the radio and whatnot. And it was really resonating. But mainly, the thing that inspired me with it was the lyrics, just his way of
Mm.
stretching the boundaries of lyrics and also singing. Casey does this thing which is uh, where you're singing a part that has like two syllables, and then maybe another one lyric has two syllables and then another lyric has uh, three or something. So instead of singing five notes that descend down because of the lyrics, you hold a note over like two of the, like the first two in the first word, and then the first syllable and the second word. So it kind
Yeah.
of like moves like a staircase. And
Yeah.
that's really hard to do when you're trying to write something and trying to record something. Because your mind goes to starting a new note on the next line or lyric. And so you kind of have to train your mind to do that. But I just thought that was really clever and cool and inspiring. So
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's cool that you can pick that stuff out too. I think that's something that maybe a lot of listeners wouldn't necessarily pick out, uh, at least not consciously. That's cool from your perspective to hear.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like now realizing, yeah, the syllables are what you're hitting a different note likely on every syllable that you're hitting in
Hmm.
a bar. Like that is
Hmm.
now just like registering like if I even if I'm doing like karaoke and now I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's like what I'm doing." And
Yeah.
I've never realized that before until you just brought that up.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty wild. It's like it's pretty fluid, right? And it is definitely, I don't know, geometry or something. It makes you sort of think completely differently.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. What would you like to plug?
Yeah, so I have a Patreon. I think it's patreon.com/Jessy Ribordy. Um, and it has, so I sort of have this audio series in which it's not a podcast because I'm just talking on it, and I'm speaking very narratively, like I'm reading a book, but it's just on our journey from the very beginning. But it goes into just a lot of details about everything that happened, and not just in general with the band, but things in the studio and things on tour and whatnot, and just all the stories and stuff that
Mm,
influenced. But mainly, my reason for doing it was to put context on a lot of stuff that I think people might have misunderstood about us.
sure.
And so I'm excited to get to the context side of things, because in this world, it's like there's a severe lack of context. So I feel like that will hopefully bring to light some things. Um, and it's not, I'm not, it's my perspective, and there's a sort of a cautionary, like I might not have remembered certain things precisely the way that were, but I'm doing the best that I can as far as memory goes. And then I'm definitely not like bringing into any drama or problems that were like, you know, it's not going to be a memoir to the point of like scrubbing somebody's name or whatnot. I just want to keep it positive. And from my
Yeah.
perspective, and like all the problems would stem from like my decision to do something or whatnot. So I have some stuff on that Patreon that includes unreleased material, as well as that
Cool.
audio series, and then some new music that's coming up. So
Nice.
Awesome. Dude, we're excited, man. It sounds like a lot of really fun stuff that's happening in your life. And
yeah.
I think listeners and fans are really, really excited to hear more from you, and to engage with your creative journey on everything. So this is great.
Yeah, yeah. I also one last thing too is
Okay.
it's not anything too in the works, but I have a series that I'm uh, sci-fi series that I'm working on, that
Ooh.
hopefully is going to Netflix. We have
Whoa.
a pretty cool team behind us. Ethan Gross from Ad Astra, or he wrote Ad Astra, and Jason Taylor is the producer on like X-Men and stuff like that. So yeah, I got a cool team behind me. I created the concept, but my wife and I wrote the pilot together, along with Ethan and a couple other people. So hopefully,
Sweet.
I don't really have many more details because it's all still to be maybe, and it's a big maybe, right? Because it's part of just that world of like hoping and doing everything you can to make some things happen. But hopefully, if that comes out, there will be some falling up lore in there that you know
That makes
Ooh.
it
that
in.
people can catch. So yeah,
Yeah, there's got to be some Easter eggs in there for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Love that. Jesse, anything else you'd like to plug?
Yeah, actually, I am writing a book on my experience that I had as a kid. So it's going to be it's going to be just documenting this one specific scenario that happened, and
Where you got
hopefully,
almost misidentified as Kurt Cobain. Is that what it was?
yeah. Actually, speaking of, there's when I had my long hair, it was like, when I was younger and stuff, I would get a lot of people who would be like, "You look like Kurt Cobain." And there was this one lady, a TSA agent in the airport, and she was like, "You are Kurt Cobain." Like she
He's
didn't believe
alive.
that, like, yeah. And I was like, how, like, he's, that's not true. So anyway, that was pretty cool. And I feel like I can see it a little bit, but not as much as like some people have pointed out. Um, but anyways, this memoir is, so when I was a kid, I was riding a bike to my friend's house, and there was a car kind of following me, and I sort of sensed it, right? When you like sense something that is not speeding up or not slowing down, and I looked back, and it was this brown Suburban, and I was like, okay, this brown Suburban. And then I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old, so I was kind of a little bit creeped out. Um, and as I was riding my bike, the Suburban was slowly following me, and whenever I'd turn back and stop my bike, they would stop. And so eventually I got to my friend's house, and I just ran in. And when I ran in, I went to my friend's mom. I was like, I think there's this car that's like going to be parked out here. And we went to the window, and there wasn't anybody there. Um, so then, a couple years later, I went out to feed my dog in the garage, and we had this like room before the garage, and I went out there, and it was dark. It was at night. I was going to flip on the light, but I sort of fumbled, and I saw something sort of look at me from behind the cabinet, and it like went back really quick. It was sort of like a light figure, like a light head. Um, and it like snuck back. And so I turned the light on, and then I waited for a second because I had to go to that area to get the dog food. I was like across the room. So I was like, I don't know if I want to go over there because I think I saw something move. Um, And so what I did was I like took a couple steps and jiggled the door handle, and then I turned off the light, and then I closed the door, but I was still in there. And I waited for like maybe a couple minutes, and sure enough, I saw this
You're a much
head.
braver 7-year-old than me. Holy shit.
I saw this head like come out, and it definitely wasn't like a humanish head. It was a weird head, and it like came out, and then it saw me, that I saw it, and knew that I was still there, and it went back. So it was just looking at me, or like wanted to see me. Um and
Wow.
um and then I ran out, but I went inside, and my mom said that there was a brown Suburban parked outside of the house. She was like looking at it through the window, and she was wondering like where I was at, and that there was this brown Suburban parked outside with their lights off. And then when we went to look, they weren't there. So this book, I just told the like a part of this stuff with this
Synopsis
brown
of the
Suburban.
small part of it. Yeah. Okay. All
Mhm.
right.
It was like 2 years of my
Wow.
life
You
with this
Do
have,
brown
do we think
Suburban.
this was a ghost or an alien?
I
or
think it was
Bigfoot.
both, because honestly, I think that we have unaccounted for the fact that like aliens could be ghosts too, or like that. Wouldn't aliens also, if they died, have ghosts? If we have ghosts, like if humans
True.
die and there's ghosts,
Oh,
then there could also be alien ghosts.
That makes
yeah,
sense.
that would make
You
sense.
know, I think this is my conspiracy theory. I think that we are the aliens on this planet.
That is a good
I think we got
conspiracy
I think
theory.
we got here somehow. We're not supposed to be here because we're always
Yep,
uncomfortable, and we're never like happy with our environment. Like we always have to go the extra mile to make ourselves more comfortable. I think we're the aliens.
absolutely. And speaking of that and ghosts, I think that, so you know how people have near death experiences, and there's always like, on most occasions, they can all be boiled down to two versions. One is it was just dark, there was nothing.
Yeah.
The other one is like a tunnel of light, and I saw my family, and I felt peaceful, and I was moving toward it, but it wasn't my time, and I moved back. Here's what I think. I think that everybody dies, and when they aren't supposed to be dead, they're supposed to be revived or go back. There's like a being or somebody, and they are right there with him, and they say, "Look, you see all this stuff behind me? It's amazing. You're gonna go here. If you don't say anything, you can say one of two things. You have two choices. You can either say it's dark, or you can say there's a tunnel of light, just a little bit of stuff in there just to keep people guessing. But that's it.
Yeah.
And if you say anything else, you won't get to be here. You will be somewhere
You
bad."
get the
So
you
I,
get the
I
It's like the
think that,
CIA or something.
yeah, I mean, wouldn't
J.
everybody
Edgar's,
just
you
be
know.
like, I'm not saying anything? So all it takes at this point is like Elon Musk or somebody crazy enough to feel like they have everything nor nothing to lose, to where I need like Elon Musk to have a near death experience, because I think he would tell the truth. And then he'd be like, guys, there's this guy, because he's gonna risk it. He's like, I have too much money to, like, I can buy that guy off when I get there.
Yeah, as somebody
That's what I
who
think.
loved Twitter before Elon Musk, I really would love him to get as close to death as possible.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. He's not, you're not wishing death upon him. You're just wishing like a near death experience.
Just close to it.
Just for a couple moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple
Yeah,
moments, and
just
for him to meet that
the
guy.
near experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the near
I,
experience.
I want him to have
Gotta
I
have
want him
one.
to have an experience similar to the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes, yeah. Speaking
Ambiguous
of movies,
ending.
yes.
Great. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for chatting more about just the history of Falling Up. Again, Falling Up is a band that I still remember. It was like one of the first kind of bands that I ever listened to that was a band where it was like, this is not my parents' music. Like, this is the music I like.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, first bands for me. And so it's just been super cool to like see your whole career kind of, do what it has done, and to still see you still making music, still loving what you do. So anyway, thanks for chatting more about it, and I look forward to this memoir. This sounds very, very interesting. This is right up my alley, so can't wait to
Oh
see it.
yeah, and it's gonna get crazy. So, well, I really appreciate
Love
you
it.
guys, and thank you for having me on. Thank you for all your kind words, and yeah, it was a blast.